Totally, totally. Yeah. Well, that's ultimately, is that not what we're here to do?
Yes, yes, it is.
Yeah, it's been something I've been thinking about for a long time, which is, I call it the cosmic periscope. That it's kind of this beautiful it's one of those things that life is just better when you believe in it.
Mm,
And it's basically that everything is a story. Everything, like, we created this whole reality to know ourselves, as like we the creators of this reality. And just like as above so below, um, just like human entertainment, we create lots of different stories to know ourselves within the story. So we have Netflix and we have all these different stories to kind of learn about all aspects of ourselves, because we as creators experience. And so the cosmic periscope is this notion that planet Earth is the greatest story in the galaxy right now. It's like kind of Game of Thrones final episode. And like the stadiums have been packed for this for this special. Jeff, I'm just going to mute you there because there you go. The the stadiums are packed. They've sold 7 billion tickets to watch the show, and it's really is truly like a showdown moment in episode Planet Earth. And when you think about the cosmic periscope, that there's the way viewers throughout the universe view is through our direct experience, through experience of ourselves, like essentially through our like eyes. And the cosmic periscope is that at any one point, just like a TV show, not all characters in the story are created like with equal. You have a lot of extras, I guess you could say. And then there's like these starring roles, and so then it's like, okay, if there's a cosmic periscope going on, and like individuals can have great ratings, and pull more bandwidth, and through more bandwidth they can like create highly rated scenes, which are like these like write a better story. It kind of makes life more fun when you think you've got an invisible viewership. So
I couldn't
it's kind
agree
of
more.
the game within the game, so.
Yeah. I did environmental education for fifth grade through high school for a good many years, and so one of the pieces that I've been putting together during this whole downtime is a kid's story where we condense all of this soils knowledge, because right now there's no place that you can go and learn functional soil science. Universities are cryptic and outdated. Um, and
Mhm.
so when I was looking at let's see, what was the other one? Just have fun, have fun. Let's let the greatest story win. It seems like the I guess one of my hopes with this incredible group of people is to find any pieces that I've been missing so that I could incorporate it into, or we could incorporate it into that like children's movie, a Pixar that people come out of actually knowing how the world works, not just being entertained with funny character X and silly character Y, but coming out and all of a sudden your 7-year old can educate your parents on how soil science and how plants work. And it seems like all the tech and all the information is there. It's just repackaging it into a story for the young mind that wants to participate.
Yeah, that's kind of how we're getting at this. Let the greatest story win. If we see that the current predominant narrative within society is a story of kind of separation and isolation and consumerism and in kind of like the cult of the individual. The question for us as like game creators here is like, how do we create a better story, a more nourishing story, a story that's based on like intergenerational wellness and regenerative design and like win for all.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's like as we think about the evolution of the game, and we think about evolution of ourselves as characters within the game, like almost like archetypal characters that are leaning into that invitation of like mythic times right now. those kind of concepts of like, how do we create a culture of education that returns, like one of the memes we created for the golden decade was back to soil and soul. And so this like question of like, how can we invite young players into the game to kind of create what is the next, like many of us grew up playing Sid Meier's Civilization, where we were creating worlds, and you know, the youth that are coming, they've been creating worlds like their whole life. And so that's like one of the things we kind of think about is like, how can we as the game evolves, you know, right now it's starting with you know, we're going to be taking 26 topics a year, you know, food being the number 2. Next week, in 2 weeks time, it's community, and then we move on like 26 pillars, and then that's what we can handle. But like, I'm sure there'll be new games created as well. But those education experiences become like ways to invite like new ritual, new culture, new like identities, new you know, kind of game rules around how people learn about some fundamental aspects of life, like back to soil and soul.
Mm,
So,
love it. Thank you.
yeah, pleasure. Well, great to have you here. Hi, Patrick. Hi, Jeff. Hey, Nikki. Hi, Mackenzie. We've got a few people said they couldn't make it today. Khan, Stephen's coming at 11:30. This week is honestly a bit of a different experiment. We had so many people want to join that. We capped it at 22. And it was a little bit unwieldy, actually. It was like 22, you know, we're trying to get what's that magic number for the number of people to get into that space of collective intelligence. And so this feels like really good as a kind of like, you know, first stage for the seed stage, because we can all really get to drop in together here. And so what we wanted to do today is we have this process of, you know, what I mentioned yesterday, yin yang, where the first 30 minutes of our time together, the intention is to set the tone of going inward together, going into our, you know, our yin space and our shared being space. And what we've done with sound is that was easy, because it was each sound practitioner had 8 minutes to share a yin kind of offering to all the other sound practitioners, and we had some really remarkable performances in the first 30 minutes of each day. And what we wanted to do today is just open it up. If you have suggestions of practices that you would like to bring into this space of this first 30 minutes we have each day. We've got 30 minutes today, well now 20 minutes. We've got 30 minutes tomorrow and 30 minutes on Thursday. And it's like the intention is to get into that balanced space of like harmonious connection with each other, deep connection. You know, I call it the new Holy Trinity, is communitas, catharsis, and ecstasis. You're feeling that oneness in community, you're feeling that collective healing, catharsis, and you're feeling that feeling of ecstasy, what happens when you enter a space where you share Dharma. So we thought an invitation might be to ask, given this is food, to ask what are those, like, if there's one moment in your life that kind of turned your relationship to food, and like that you really recognize as like one of those, like, you know how we often think back to our childhood and we're like, oh, it was that moment that like seeded this like childhood trauma in me that like shows up in all my relationships, that kind of thing, but the equivalent for food in a good way. Well, not that that's the bad way, by the way, but you know what I mean. So like, what was that moment where you really kind of like fell in unconditional love with food? Might be a good place for us to start, but very open to anyone else's offering for the next 20 minutes. Good to see you, Nikki.
Hey, sorry, I was walking, so I couldn't turn on the camera, but I'm sitting now.
Perfect.
And I'm sorry, I wrote in the chat, I can't stay very long today. I still wanted to link in a little bit today, but the other days I have logged in my agenda.
Perfect. We're trusting in the flow, you know. It's like we don't want to be attached to 22 people. We're trusting in the flow of what's emerging because it's exactly how this has been unfolding. So, you know, come when you can. And like our intention is that where possible, people stay for the 6 hours of this week. And then we follow up next week with a retrospective where we bring in your feedback into the game, and we're constantly evolving the game. And then in 2 weeks' time, we'll kick off the Sprout stage, which is where we'll start to form we'll create the Unified Planet Food Alliance, which is kind of I think of it as a co-op that can raise funding to fund particular projects. And then we'll create whatever guilds have energy to them. So see this as a way for like an infrastructure for you to bring the projects you're already working on, but like connect them into this like community ecosystem. So I maybe welcome Joshua. Maybe we could start Sycamore if we have a track record of me calling on you when you're not ready. But like what was the moment, Sycamore, for you when you went from KKK to like food warrior? What was that tipping point moment? Was there a particular experience you had that kind of awoke you in some sense?
Yeah, thanks for that. I'll be brief. I mean, from Krispy Kreme and KFC to Sacred Food Warrior. That's a great storyline. I'd say there's two moments. One, that you can edit out of the video is when I dropped acid and looked at all my pre-law books, and I was like, hell no, I'm not going to be a lawyer. These are not edible in the future. And I knew that the food crisis was coming, and I needed to be actually resilient. But more so, it was when my first farming internship in 2011, when I worked on a CSA, community supported agriculture farm in central Kentucky, and we had a production tomato operation. And I was introduced to the Cherokee Purple and the Sun Gold cherry tomato for the first time. And I was tending like hundreds and hundreds of tomato plants every day, pruning them, trellising them, and selling hundreds of pounds of tomatoes at the market every week. And I was like, the earth can just do this with just this tiny little twig in the ground. I am like forever in your stewardship and forever in your grace. And the fact that you can put like a tiny, tiny seed in the ground and it create hundreds of pounds of food and thousands of seeds. I knew from then forward that I would dedicate my life to manifesting that level of abundance for everyone. Yeah. Food is where it's at. Thanks.
And as a ritual, Sycamore, like this was one thing you'll see. We pulled this out as one of the themes that came from yesterday, and it was a follow-on from Sound for Health, which was sound reverence, and we felt this like piece that kind of pulled on my heart yesterday of food reverence, but it's more like food, soil, like life reverence in some sense. When you think about your own experience kind of returning into right relationship with food and the earth, what do you think is the from a ritual or rite of passage, because we're kind of there does seem to be this opportunity for us to do a great reframing of our relationship to food, a great remembering of our relationship to food. I wanted just to hear if you've got any thoughts on that.
Innumerable thoughts. Respecting the yin space of like people's introductions. I would love to like give the time back, particularly to Nikki, who has 2 more minutes until she needs to leave. And so just keeping the introduction round going, and then I can talk reverence for the next decade.
And will, and do. Nikki, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Well, it's just thank you for sharing as well your story, because I think we all had these sort of crucibles, these turning moments, right, related to food. And for me, food is identity. So I'm originally Polish, as you can see in my last name, but I had to leave my country when I was very young. And I always say I had the opportunity to leave the country because it was under communism regime, and there were not many opportunities, and we lost a lot after World War II. And so when we left the country, obviously the sense of belonging is very strong for everyone. It's a human thing, right? We want to belong, we want to be like the others, and I've always been different. And so living in different countries, I was seeking for that identity. And I think it was around when I was 19, 20, I think it was 20 actually, where I realized that I'm Polish. And I am Polish because of these cultural elements in food. Because I don't know what the Germans, what the Americans prefer for Christmas, or what they share and how they celebrate around the table. But I know all of the Polish traditions. So I know all of the 12 dishes we cook. I know how we harvest them and why we eat only dried and pickled foods during Christmas. And so that's where I found my identity. And so for me, food is that identity, the culture. And I think that's what we're trying to reproduce as well with refugees, and trying to help them integrate in their new culture through food and the table, and finding that pride in their heritage.
Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. And heritage and I imagine also ancestry.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
and I know you can relate to it, Lucian. So
I was eating yesterday, I was eating borscht mixed with kitchery, which is like two deep childhood identities. And just one reflection there on food is, you know, as we think about one of the great problems of our time right now is the partisanship of left and right. You know, that people are not meeting each other, and they're othering at a level that we've like rarely seen at a planetary level. You know, how do we go in a different direction? We think is by going backwards into one's heritage and lineage and ancestry in order to go forwards. So the kind of way out of this like win-lose dynamic of left and right is backwards and forwards, and it's kind of it's like a different game that one can place. And as you talk about food and identity, I think this is like deeply core to that. So thank you so much, Nikki. And go whenever you need to. And
thank you.
We'll keep you in the emails, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
Yes, tomorrow I'll definitely be there. I'll still listen in a little bit more to hear some more stories, and I'll drop out when I need to. Thank you.
Who's feeling next is I much prefer people to do the kind of Quaker call when you feel the energy than specific calling on people. But I saw Adam, you've unmuted.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start. I think as far as identity, I've always been someone who had far more energy than anyone else, and always felt like it was a detriment. And so that led me into alpine climbing and mountain climbing. And that still seemed like a selfish pursuit until I stumbled upon a farm called Growing Power in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, by a great man named Will Allen, if you're familiar. And I went and worked there for 2 weeks, and it was like walking into an ant mound. Every ethnicity, age, culture was represented there. You had the oldest people just standing there in big wide brimmed hats, kind of barking orders. This goes there, that goes there. They knew how the whole system worked. The younger folks, and even 15-year-old kids, are all moving wheelbarrows, compost into worm castings, into tilapia and fish beds, and just cranking out incredible amounts of food for the community. In many of their cases, free food. And the community members in these food deserts would come up and just say, "Hey, who's all this food for?" And we would just be able to respond, "This is yours, harvest it whenever you want." And the response on their face from these strangers that you'd find, and you could just say, "This acre of collard greens that's been planted and ready to harvest, this is yours, harvest as much as you want." They'd run into their houses and come back out with buckets and call out to their neighbors and say, "Hey, these are our collard greens. This is our food. This is our corn." it was just an incredible moment to be like, this is the workforce, that this is what I've been training for, to be able to work hard, hot days, and just be a part of an ant mound. And, you know, lead when need to lead, but really love just following and working hard with teams of younger people. And after that, after seeing that proof existence, that type of scalability of moving, mobilizing, and assessing nutrients into communities that need it, was just, you know, put everything I could towards learning how to do more of that. So here I am. Still learning.
So the getting as a synthesis of that, and kind of the cultural diversity and inclusion that comes through our shared love and celebration of food and growing food. Yeah. Jeff, you're next, but anyone else?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to go. You know, it's funny. I don't identify with food as a soul thing for me. For me, it's part of just this whole healthy relationship with the earth that I'm hoping humanity can do. So it's land stewardship, it's food, it's, you know, economic systems, etc. So that's my frame. And in terms of like a wake up moment, I think it was really when I was in Italy with my family when I was in 6th grade. You know, I grew up in Southern Cal and then was in Europe, and for 6 months my dad had a sabbatical, and we went down to Italy, and just seeing these families that had been on, you know, pieces of land for generations. We went out into Tuscany and just saw the spark in the eye, and the food on the ground and the food in the table was really a big wake up moment for me around food. And for me, I see it as deeply connected to just the overall, you know, sort of systems of how humans interact with land and earth in general. And so I'm excited to work on food. I just see food in the context of the bigger picture that I'm trying to deal with my company now, with Local Code.
Yeah, I think all of us, you know, with the victory gardens of Corona, you know, and the relationship that people are having with food just in these times, I think is very pertinent. So, Rachel, do you want to go next?
Sure. Do you want to repeat the prompt for me so that I can?
Yeah, sure. So what we're inviting for the yin space is for you to reflect on that tipping point moment, that turning point moment, where you really like deepened your relationship to food. Was there a point in your, like a single moment of transformation that you had in your life where you kind of reframed?
Got it. Yeah. So for me,
Would you mind turning your video on?
Oh goodness.
Thank you.
After my workout? Yeah, sure. See, do you see me? Am I up? Great. Oh, let me take my end off. Hold on, give me 1 second. Sorry, I don't want to have I don't want to mix brands right now. Yeah, so for me, food and health as food, or food as health, started at a really young age for me. And I was always the person in my household growing up creating rainbows in the kitchen. And it was a joy for me to offer that to my family. And we always had, I guess you could call it a victory garden growing up in my household, with chickens and food growing in the backyard at my grandma's house. And when I had gone pre-med, it was a huge focus of mine, and also turning really popular food into really healthy food. And at one point along the journey, I had created healthy cupcakes, like medicinal cupcakes for people, that involved a lot of herbology integration into it, and created like a really fun system around that. And then I have lived at this beautiful eco village in Colorado, Sunrise Ranch. And I've been here for nearly 10 years. And we have a Beyond Organic farm here. And it's just been such a joy to participate in a complete farm to fork program that's out here, and to be around people and the land here. It's never been sprayed by chemical. And so it's just been a really just thrilling journey in food and in land stewardship and understanding right relationship with seasons and life and cycles. And for most of my time here at Sunrise Ranch, my connection to the gardens has been mostly abstract. Like, I'm not a gardener in the garden. I'm in a very different part of like the operations here. But what I did learn is that I'm still a farmer. Even though I don't go into the garden with the soil every day, even though that's not happening, although I love it when I do get to go out there, and my children as well, there's still seeds that I'm planting and that I'm sowing and that I'm nurturing. And I learned a lot from the garden and biodynamics and permaculture and all kinds of really interesting things that I never expected to learn about, and how like unbelievably applicable it is into business and finance, and like reimagining so many other types of systems that I get to interplay with. So that's my short story about it. And
Well, Rachel, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And welcome, Cara. Delighted to have you here. And Stephen's joining us. We're strong on the Costa Rica crew. Mackenzie, and then Patrick, and then we'll go to you, Cara.
I'd like to share as well.
Yeah.
Hey.
Hey, Mackenzie. We don't have your video in case, and that incredible view of yours. There you go.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
So yeah, I mean, in terms of a really definitive moment, I really do have one. I got injured when I was in the Marines, and I was epileptic for about 10 years. And I, having something of a sweet tooth, and sort of in my attempts to deal with the pain, I sort of turned to sugar as almost a palliative in a way. And particularly for the first, kind of 5-6 of the worst years of it, when I was hurting and nothing else was really working, I would just eat sugar and sugar and sugar and more sugar, and I got heavy. I was about 285 at one point, and had osteoarthritis really, really badly, and my uric acid counts were just off the charts. So it was extremely painful in all the joints and the whole thing, right? And so I moved down to Panama because I still had access to the Veterans Administration for medical care there, and life was less expensive and a little easier and more fun, and I figured I'd kind of make my way there, and bit by bit, I realized how much drinking I was doing, and how much eating, sugar and just sort of junk food I was doing, and the effect that it was having on my body. And I remember sitting in the floor one night, and when I had seizures, my shoulders would dislocate, and that happened a lot. And so both my shoulders had been rebuilt, and I was sitting on the floor in the kitchen in Panama one night. I was putting groceries away, and I was sitting on the floor because my feet were so swollen I couldn't stand on them. And my feet and toes, and my fingers and toes for about a year didn't bend. They call it sausage digits. It's a part of osteoarthritis. And so my feet were really, really swollen and just hurt too much to stand on. So I was sitting on the floor in the kitchen trying to put groceries away. And I reached back with my left arm and I grabbed a gallon of milk and went to pull it around to put it into the fridge, and it dislocated my shoulder. And I was sitting on the floor in a huge amount of pain, and I had dropped the gallon of milk when it dislocated my shoulder, and it broke open and it was spilling all over the floor. And I was just miserable, like just at the ends of the physical pain, the moment, the misery, the reflection, all of it, and recognizing that in my attempts to assuage sort of the suffering of the moment, with short-term stuff like sugar and booze and etc., I was creating the layers over top of the pain that I would then later have to lose as weight and all the rest of the the manifestations of cleansing and the work that it takes to get clearer and clearer and clearer over time.
Okay,
And
how old were you at this point?
that was 2007.
Would you say this was like PTSD?
Yeah, one of the ratings the VA gave me, actually, they recently upped my disability percentage to 100%, and what got it over 100% was a PTSD rating. And I never imagined having that. I never imagined, like, nobody had ever, I had never thought, oh well, that makes sense for me. I'm not a combat vet. I don't have those kinds of experiences. But a couple of years ago, one of the counselors sat down with me and said, 10 years of seizures and a coma and osteoarthritis and 7 surgeries and, on and on. Yeah. You qualify for PTSD. So it was a big moment for me. And that moment on the floor, that was when everything stopped, and I stopped eating all the sugar, and I did a massive cleanse and lost 100 pounds and, blah, blah, blah. And that was, 13, 14 years ago.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. What a beautiful, visual metaphor for us all. Like, it needed you to get onto the floor, dislocated and broken, for you to like make that commitment. It's really powerful. Thank you. Thank you. Patrick, it says connecting to your audio. I'm not sure if you can hear us. Let's go to Joshua.
I have my story is like not as dramatic, but it was this very like real moment for me that I'll never forget. And I grew up as an athlete, so I was always playing up through college football and baseball and other sports growing up. So I was always very active, and I would eat whatever was in front of me. And as a suburban American kid with a single working mother, that was McDonald's and Hungry Man frozen dinners and sugar and pizza and just all the crap. And in my young 20s, when I stopped playing, I started packing on the pounds. I also started a family, and I'll never forget being at my in-laws' house, and I was chasing a toddler of mine up the stairs and got to the top of the flight of stairs, and I was out of breath. And in that moment of like struggling to breathe, just going up the stairs, I looked at my children and I was like, I can't, like, I have to be there for them. I got to figure this thing out. And it was a striking moment for me in what I was putting in my body and the disconnect that I had with that. I mean, I would just sit down and like watch a sporting event on TV, and like typical American, I was like eating a pizza and drinking a liter of Coke. And it was killing me. And that's for me a big inspiration in this game and what it is we're trying to do, not only like change the dynamics and how we grow food and how we educate people and all that, but just really connecting people back to their bodies and the food and the earth and what it is that they're consuming. As a suburban American kid, I was trained and programmed and advertised to just eat all this stuff. And for me, it's like, I know this is a lot of the work. It's not only like making the way and preparing it and having the gardens and all that, but teaching people, again, what it is they're putting in their food and doing a lot of that reprogramming. And that's what inspires me. But that's like I can remember that moment like it was yesterday, kind of a thing, and it completely shifted me. I got back into fitness, and I started really watching what I ate. And the more I felt better in my body, the more I realized what it was doing to me.
Thank you, Joshua. Cara, can you hear us? I notice you're on mute.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can hear you guys. Hi.
Hi, welcome, Cara.
Hi.
Can we see your
hold on.
wonderful face? There we go.
Actually cooking right now.
Oh, I'm so happy to see you.
Oh,
Thank you for
lovely.
being here.
Hi. Aw, so many friends. Could you tell me what the prompt was? I've been listening.
Yeah. So the prompt is that moment in your life that reframed your relationship with food. That kind of like took you into a deeper connection and reverence for food.
A moment in life that reframed my connection with food. Let me think about that, because I don't have one top of mind as like the moment. I think it's been a series of many moments. I mean, for me, it's always been going into a garden and seeing like where food is grown, and then also like growing food myself and seeing how long it takes and being like, what, that potato took that long that I just casually grabbed off of a supermarket shelf, so I grew up really going into like urban community gardens, and everywhere that I was, like whenever I was traveling, I'd always find the community garden and then go spend time there. And it was like where I kind of like remembered myself and came back to myself, and it was always surrounded by growing food as a community, and being in the garden and seeing kids in the garden too. Like that to me, everybody feels like they can unite around a vegetable in the ground. And there's something magical about it because so many people don't get to see it in the flesh, in the soil. So I love seeing children in the garden. For me, that like totally frames, or like, been doing these farm to table dinners here in Costa Rica with Sycamore and Stephen. And just also seeing people light up when they like eat food that was grown right there. And then the connection in people's brains, for me, like being able to pick something and then put it on my plate, like within minutes, really puts our whole agricultural system into perspective. So that was like, just as a kid, being able to grow my own sweet peas, was the first thing I think I grew, and then eating it off of the vine and being like, oh wow, okay, this is what food is, comes from the earth.
Yeah. And what an inheritance. It's we're the unfortunately the anomalies that get to have those experiences. Cara, you and I and others that here among us. I think it's not the norm. So thank you so much, Cara. Do you wanna?
Sure. Yeah, I think me too is a series of moments of just experiencing the power of food to bring people together. I grew up in the Hebrew tradition where gathering around the table and eating food together was just a really sacred activity that brought distant family together and was always just such a beautiful, nourishing time, and always just had just really valued food and the experiences of just simply having a nice meal together with family and friends. Additionally, I had a tradition of doing a lot of fasting in my 20s, and the build up to like a meal afterwards, and just totally savoring and appreciating the bliss that is nourishing our body temples. And so value food, and especially as it relates to our relationship to the earth and the ecologies we're in, and both like, within the world itself and then within the micro world of our microbiome, and just getting kind of geeking out on that and really feeling that in my experience of life, how what we put into our bodies, how it becomes us. And so it's been a steady stream of reverence for food, and yeah.
Beautiful. Stephen.
Hello.
Hello. We can't see you yet.
Yes, right here. Sitting, talking about food. This is all food that my friends grew where I'm eating right now. I tasted meat last night for the first time in 30 years.
Whoa, that is
30 years I haven't eaten meat. My friend and his son slaughtered this lamb. And I took a bite of it last night. Literally since 1993, I hadn't had a bite of meat. And now I'm not eating more of it, but I did put a little of the gravy on my rice and beans that I'm eating. And it's pretty much all from literally like this epic homestead where I'm staying right now.
I gotta go. Wow.
Last night was a big moment for me with my food journey.
How did that feel in your body, Steven?
You know, not such a big deal. You know, I'm more of an environmental vegetarian. I'm not like a diehard, like, don't kill animals. I'm more of just like an environmental vegetarian. And I stopped eating meat so long ago that my body didn't need it. So I just didn't go back. And yeah, but it's amazing to eat it and to appreciate my friend and his son and seeing the parents of this lamb that they slaughtered and just how dedicated they are to these animals and the space they've created for them and how incredibly they take care of them.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Steven.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you guys.
We'll move into the yang now. This is beautiful, just all connecting. And I'd love to share mine. I grew up, my first job, most of my childhood was a farmer. I've grown food, like since I was born. And I used to love gardening. We had a huge garden and many apple trees. And I had special relationships with the apple trees. It was, I would start selling those apples. And I realized money grows on trees. I realized at 5 years old that I can knock on neighbors' doors. And I had this advantage of being a 5-year-old with a wheelbarrow that literally they couldn't refuse, but buy my apples. And so I had this relationship with food all through my childhood. I was a complete country boy. I didn't really leave the countryside until I was 18. It was me and my animals and my trees and my tree houses, etc. But one moment in particular, because I had like deep reverence for nature. It was actually only later in life that I realized that most other people believe themselves to be separate from nature, and that was like a complete I had to kind of like understand how other people are, because I kind of thought everybody was like the way I was, as one does with a child. But there's one particular moment that I had I was kind of like and still am a bit of an animal whisperer and get very close relationships with animals. And I would work with Farmer Rudge, our local neighbor, and he and I would do we'd pick wild oats and we'd do the sheep's foot dipping and things like that. And he had pigs, and I built a deep relationship with the mother called Piggy. Her and I would hang out and hug for hours and hours and hours. And I'd we loved each other dearly. She would let me ride on her back. And it was like my happy place was hanging out with Piggy with my dogs. And there was one occasion, it was one of those tough parenting lessons where Piggy wasn't there anymore, and she had piglets. And I think my parents wanted to teach me about food. And a few weeks later, the fridge was full of bacon and sausages, and it was a really hard lesson. I was deep reverence of food. I started to realize this relationship I had with this animal was what we eat, and that was forever kind of really seared in me, this reverence for food. And I as painful as that was as a 7-8-year-old child, it was something that I kind of appreciate in the kind of masochistic nature of one's childhood. But so that was my story, and I just forever have felt that food is part of the codes for how we will remember who we are.
Prayers up and gratitude for Piggy Piggy.
Piggy Piggy. So what we want to do, shifting gears now, and thank you for your shares there. I had gone through and just was listening yesterday to. This is so bright. I'm gonna see if I can move. Maybe if you could put that down further, Brian. Went through these 8 topics, and what we're looking for, even at the beginning of the week, is it's even brighter for some reason. I'm not sure why. What we're looking for here is for us to begin to bring the foundations of fundable community solutions, in particular for the Planetary Commons. So the whole point of the game is for us to be able to apply collective intelligence to bring these solutions out, and then ultimately create the infrastructure that can end up getting those solutions scaled and funded with all forms of resources they need. And so what we were doing yesterday is listening as people were sharing their introductions, listening for where, essentially where the themes might be. And so what we wanted to do today is just list those. We shared them in the email, but list them and then think like, what are we missing here as a synthesis? Those themes that we went through was the number 1, urban food. So all things sustainable infrastructure, cradle to cradle, victory gardens, like cultures around things like, I've been speaking with Nadim about creating a circular, almost like a society where we would pair communities with local regenerative farms and have like a kind of food to fork direct kind of community relationships. And so where we want to lead that track, there's definitely a there that I think is very timely. The second one, a number of people talked about this. Stephen, this is something for you to really contribute to, but we called it the food genome. And this was basically the food, soil, and seed banks. So like more like study of food and study of soil, study of seeds, like getting into that. Thirdly was food education, so all things education from all different ages, initiatives around community, like identifying what projects already exist around that. Ecoversity being one great example.
Yeah, and I'm not sure like the plant genetic collections and the plant education aren't in the same space.
Yeah.
You know, because often when we think about a seed bank, often people are thinking about like a closet with boxes that are labeled with different kinds of seeds. But especially in the tropics, the genetics are really stored in live living trees. Like you're grafting off of the collection of signwood of all the different varieties of the different species that are living live trees. So what you create is these demonstration projects that become educational, but also the genetic collections in the same place. So just add that.
Maybe, yeah, this is a perfect example of like the refinement of these. The language we have for them, they're actually called uploads. Each one of these 8 is an upload, which creates an upgrade in the form of the game. So that sounds like food genome and food education should be groups. What's going to happen in 2 weeks' time, and we're seeing this emerge, is as we create the Unified Planet Food Alliance, which is essentially a cooperative structure to bring funding to fund these different projects and guilds. Like as that begins to take shape, food education is going to be one of those aspects. So things like food genome, they will be like initiatives of that alliance. And then that's where other food communities can all be part of that alliance is kind of how we're seeing it emerge with Sound. But this was a really good one. And then next one, and I think this is a critical point. This may end up being a kind of guild in its own right, or it may actually be something like a initiative of the alliance to bring it to all aspects of food. And that was following your shares, Sycamore, and all of us today, but food reverence. So rituals, rite of passages, remembrance around food felt like something that we should call out. 5, this again, Stephen, this is something that you raised and a couple of other people raised as well, but the food and human biome. So we felt that that might be something like a topic in its own right. And feel free as you're listening to these, go and say like, that's actually a subsection of that, and you've missed this category. You're the experts here. 6 was food technology, things like geoponics. A lot will get brought into this category. And 7 was.
But just to go back on food technology, it's such a crucial piece. Is all the food processing. It doesn't matter how much food we're creating if we can't process it and store it and spread it. That feels like a really important piece of that technology.
Do you feel, because a topic I'm extremely passionate about is food waste. Do you feel like food waste should be its own topic, or do you think that's part of food technology?
I mean, I think so many of these topics are kind of overlapping. You know, whether it's the education and the food reverence. Seems like one topic, food education. Education around food. Obviously, we need to incorporate reverence and ritual. The technology around food waste. I think with the right processing, you have a lot less waste. With the right, from farm to table, when we hijack that route and make it so much closer, there's a lot less room for waste.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I was going to say,
river next to me, so I'm staying on mute.
That's awesome. I love all the topics you have here. I feel like there's a blending of like, tools with sort of big buckets of a topic, and that's fine. But I think, you could probably come up with 3 arenas or so, and then put things within the arenas. Might be a little bit, because it's a long list. Community, like regenerative development is a big bucket. Urban food can fit in that. And then education obviously has things like food and the human biome could be part of that. So I would probably look at, 2 or 3, probably 3 realms, and then, fit things within them. So the trust is a solution concept, and food technology has a bunch of solution concepts in it. But they're tools in the tool shed, in my opinion. It's all great. It's funny. I've been mapping this for local code, trying to look at a systemic challenge and try to reduce it into a digestible set of buckets. So I'm in the thick of that right now, of that type of practice.
Yeah, well, Jeff, we actually, the way we've been doing this is we attempt at the seed stage to go to first principles and come up with kind of almost like the categories. So for sound, it was things like sound reverence, sound space, soundscaping. There was sound body, like the way sound affects the body. There was we had 8 of them. And it's a good reference point to see how we were doing that. But then what happens once we've gone to those first principles and identified community solutions, we then bucketed them back into verticals and horizontals. So the horizontal is always part of the alliance. Education is perfect example of a horizontal. It's part of that Unified Planet Food Alliance. And then the verticals are kind of initiatives like Food Technology Guild is going to be a vertical that can receive funding and have multiple projects running in service of the commons is kind of how we think about it. And it's all emergent how this is taking shape. But what we're finding is that people are seeing the Unified Planet structure as a very helpful kind of stackable system where they can bring their solutions and use that as a way to kind of create more awareness for them. So
that's good. So you're making a list now and then you'll organize them later. That's fine. And then I would add food justice as a topic that's really critical then. That's kind of, if I were to look at if we're just taking a list and not worrying about how they all kind of fit perfectly with each other now, I would add food justice to the list.
That's bang on, and that will definitely be here because I think this is how we connect food with social justice is going to be central here. So 7, I put Planetary Land Trust. I think this is kind of the bigger. There's a bigger play here, and that might be that could be a solution in its own right. Stephen, kind of 1001 hectares, and other projects, Joe Brewer, David Levy, numerous other people like talking about this kind of thing. Then 8, we put community regenerative development, which I totally see as kind of urban food could be a subcategory of that. So maybe like we should group urban food and community regenerative development. If we group that and introduce food justice, what else are we missing? I mean, like there's so much. 8, you can never summarize something so like giant into 8, but like we want to get 8 essentially areas we know for sure that we can introduce projects in, and those projects could be like the 8 most effective way for us to reframe our relationship with food and like think about how we redesign food systems to be regenerative.
So the last comment I'd make is the Planetary Land Trust. I mean, I love the idea of working with land trusts. I'm doing that with local code, but I would make a broader frame and call it land and food stewardship, because the land trust is basically a stewardship technique. But I think it needs a bigger bucket around ownership and land stewardship and food and land stewardship. So I would probably make 7 a bit bigger.
That's great.
Yeah.
Love that. Stephen, do you agree with that point?
Yes, I agree. I can't help but think like all of these fall into 1001. Like all of them, are incorporated into creating replicable models that incorporate all of the things that you're saying, from education to how they merge with community to, food justice. I mean, it feels like, yeah, I mean, I love this idea of trying to find places that are ready to create the examples that we could do, that need to happen everywhere. And they include the genetic, food banks, of all the genetics. They include, a culture of food reverence. They include education, and they're merged with community, and there's urban spaces in them. All of it is included. So I think, I'm starting to get excited about the media and the storytelling of what does this look like? What does this next chapter look like? I think we can very, delicately and beautifully paint that this next step and be very clear. It's like I spent my morning with my partner Itai here talking about what is the next step, and what, like, it's such a big vision and it's so broad, and we're really starting to get clear on next steps. It's like Charles Eisenstein said in the coronation, it's like, it always feels like the crossroads is right there ahead. Like we're just about to reach, it's all about to happen. I felt it at 2002 at Bioneers, like, holy shit, it's all about to happen. Oh my God. And then it turns into a mirage and fades away. So I sit on these calls and I'm so enthusiastic. I'm so excited. And again, I feel like I'm looking at the horizon, and there's the crossroads, and I'm just don't want it to disappear like a mirage.
Yeah. Well, one thing I think would be helpful, part of the game aspect is how do we shine a light on what's working and kind of scale that in a sense of like, how do we take the memes that we know are like based in the world we want to live in and spread them. And so we had with sound, we had, what do we call it? It's now the Science of Sound matrix. But it was like sound communication essentially. And we talked a lot about propaganda, and that there's so much kind of dark propaganda going on around the world, and the war on trust and disinformation, etc. Like, how can we establish a Unified Planet as a trusted brand, like a trusted cooperative organization without any center, to be able to disseminate this message of like food education and food awareness, etc. So one category we could potentially think about as a community solution is what role, where like communications and like memes and education and like in ways like, how can we need to be better at spreading wholesome messages as the like darker forces of our world are at spreading unwholesome messages. And so thinking about that with food might be something for us to consider as a category.
I think also to Steven's point, like all of it kind of, it's 1001, right? It loops back in. And as he was saying that, and as I look at this game in the perspective of we're all staying as one group, maybe instead of this is like multiple avenues with different, maybe smaller funds, this really does become a broad picture thing with multiple things, and we go after one big fund.
Yeah, well, and that's where the I can see the alliance, the Food Alliance, being something being something kind of a way to channel funding and into that. So, any other comments on these? Like, what else are we missing?
I guess one of the pieces that I've thought about for a while is the technology that we have to have access to has to match or exceed what the dark forces are using. So like mapping technologies. Right now, so many permaculturists use Google Earth. Great tool, very simple. But on the other side, the geospatial software that oil pipelines are using is far and beyond above simple tools like Google Earth. So having some ability to basically upgrade the technology and design tools that farmers, individuals have access to, so that they can visualize, so that they can educate themselves through, you know, let's say repurposing a software like a Fortnite type video game or the Call of Duty type video game software programmers for those SimCity type things. You know, we have all these incredible technologies available. We just need to repurpose them and put them with a new guise of, you know, what does that Buckminster Fuller livingry look like? So that people can see it on a video game, they can see it on their own screen, they can see it on their handheld device. And
One sec, Cara. Just one sec. If you want to just share a word and anything before you go, and I'm sorry to.
That's okay.
Cara's got to go. Sorry, Adam.
I know. I just have to jump off. I'll join later in this week. I just wanted to say hello.
Awesome.
And yeah, lovely to see all of you and keep the good conversation going.
And any thoughts you've got, Cara, is like, please do sleep on this, because these become like foundational pillars that can then.
No, and I hope everybody on the call, Kara and I are partners in all of that we're doing down here. Like Kara is fully in, all in down here doing it day by day. And that's probably why she has to get off.
Yeah, no, yeah, like we're, Stephen and I are partners, business partners in Alegria Village and in kind of the whole, like we're sort of we've been working through, especially in the last 2 weeks, things have accelerated. Like what is this model for the 1001 concept and what are those different aspects? And like the way that I see it is a completely regenerative, you know, not just a regenerative model in terms of the land, planting trees, bringing the soil back to life, growing food, but the whole regenerative ecosystem and the jobs that's created and the equity that's created and farmers, you know, cooperatives and initiatives to keep money in the land, you know, where food is being grown and make sure that the stewards of that land are also owners in the long-term vision. So we've been working through those models here. And yeah, I'm excited to be part of this conversation and happy to contribute throughout the week as I can.
I know.
Steven, you're not on mute. Love you. Okay. Bye, guys.
Thank you so much, Cara. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
I was on mute. I was sitting here bragging about you to Leah. You heard?
Yeah, we did.
I was on mute though.
I muted you. Mackenzie.
Well, I'm curious.
Adam, I apologize. Sorry, Adam. I sorry, Mackenzie. One sec. Adam,
I was responding to Adam actually. Yeah, I'd love to hear that.
Are you good, Adam?
Good.
Cool. Thanks, Mackenzie.
Adam, were you asking that question? Were you suggesting that the geospatial tools for this, or were you saying that you're aware of that?
I guess I was suggesting it. I've only seen those types of geospatial tools available with large costly subscriptions and available at the big ag type level. Just perusing briefly with Karn's work, it appears that he has access to that, but in my own experience, I haven't found access to very good visualization technologies that's affordable and accessible, shareable. Every individual processing it doesn't need additional subscription.
Help you find a couple tools there, because that's been a big piece of my, sort of our ongoing conversation for like a decade now, trying to figure out how to make what is a really systemic consideration for farmers, day to day in the field, where you're looking, from a forester, like from Stephen's perspective, where, as a botanist, he doesn't just look at the plant that's in front of him. He looks at, what's supporting that plant in the soil and all the, not just the trees, but, the other species in the ecosystem that are really helping to create the conditions by which the trees and the plants thrive. And, those kinds of considerations are layered, and they take a lot of experience and knowledge that not everybody has. And so from an extended reality perspective, think about virtual reality, augmented reality, that kind of thing. From an extended reality perspective, for a number of years, there have been people developing like glasses that you can put on, walk into your greenhouse. And when you look at any plant in the greenhouse, the real-time information about the inputs and the environmental variables and the life of that plant kind of pop out, right? There's also some Google Earth-based tools, but kind of imagine Google Earth in 3D, where you can use what's called multimodal data. So like drones and smartphones and satellites, and you can stitch together different kinds of information around farm fields or forests or communities, and layer in different types of kind of multimedia that make that data more accessible and interactive. And for example, if a farmer needs to go out and put the plants in the field, what if you could design all of that in augmented reality first, and then build in literally every single step in the process, every screw, nut, and bolt, every seed in virtual reality, and have everybody walk through it a couple times and tweak and tune it before they hit the fields, and then in real time, have somebody, talking to you through your glasses while the drones are overhead, paying attention to how wet the field is where you are, how much water to apply, how the spacing for the seeds based on the amount of light and the prevailing winds, and a lot of things that people just don't, because they're not artificial intelligence built to support us, they just don't consider it, right? So if you look at a platform called Verses, VERSES.io, there's a guy named Dan Mapes who's pretty incredible. It's been developing that for a number of years. And you can also look at planet.com, and they have some really cool tools there. And so we're working with a guy named Neil Sahota on the artificial intelligence side. Our chief of science has the growing system on the space station. And we're working on a soil to space program where we integrate multimodal data. And those are the partners that we want to work with. So there's a value chain piece to this, a value chain transparency piece to this that, we see as the ability to, kind of source and finance and scale regenerative agriculture and regenerative development, and a lot of it has to do with a bunch of people that, don't speak the same language, coming together around really complicated problems and being able to go into the problems together in literal, models of communities and forests and, the ecology, economy, and community, dynamics, if you will, that finance, insurance, and philanthropy and policy, really have to consider to make good decisions. So yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'll look into this. Yeah. That's exactly the hope that I was having.
And this is perfect example, Mackenzie, actually, of like how this will evolve. How each of these uploads, we actually want to be like a really tangible solution. So, for example, if one of the solutions in food is like applying Verses to the food, like ecology, like Dan Mapes is a total brother, deeply committed to work with each other. We're like, I love him so dearly. So it's that kind of thing where we could say like, okay, here's the ability to fund the application of Verses into the commons to be made available to all, like anybody that wishes to use this technology in an application of food. that's the kind of thing we want to be getting at by the end of this week, of like initial like seed solutions that are fundable, that kind of have like the concepts behind them, and we create a one-page document for each one of these solutions, and then that brings us into in 2 weeks time, where we start to like form guilds and the alliance around how we deliver on those. And we go on this journey all the way out to harvest stage, where the idea is like by that time we do a demo day and we present, here are the synthesized collective intelligence. So this number of people that are kind of experts in the field that are making these recommendations for the planetary commons. And so as you're thinking about this, like versus Will Marshall from Planet is a dear friend as well. Planet is a like partner of Savannah. We co-hosted an event together in Davos. And so things like that, where we have like deep existing relationships, like if there's a solution that exists with Planet and Versus, we're all in, because we can make that happen like today. So those are the kind of things as we're thinking here. Like, is there a like, that would be really cool to find a way for like Will at Planet and Planet Versus to collaborate together to create something for the planetary commons that's like unlike anything we can imagine. We can make that happen together.
Lucian, then make it happen, friend of mine, because we absolutely have the tools for that toolbox. And James Hanusa and Dan and I have been dancing around a call for a month. All of the planet.com guys built APIs that were specifically designed for open source access to these kinds of geospatial tools, right? So we have data sources from 3,000 people around the world on the accomplishment of the SDGs locally and globally, and from the International Space Station. We can build that into existing artificial intelligence today. And those guys can make it real. Those guys can bring it to life. So please.
So here's this is so hot. This is like, you know, when you say, this is like the seeing the future. Like, what if this was easy? What if we were just friends with everybody that could like do all this? So if, as you go through today, Mackenzie, like what, like as you're thinking about this pillar of like food technology, or geospatial could be actually be a category in its own right. As we think about that upload, like what, like how would we like literally spell the future, like describe what that solution is in the planetary commons?
Build it, design it live in living color in those models, and then put virtual reality, extended reality devices, biometrics on the people, the local people, and literally walk them through accomplishing the SDGs. I mean, imagine a farmer putting on his glasses in the morning and being like, this is what's important today, because your drones just flew your land. Here's what's dry. This is what's got yellow leaves. Here's, you got a breakout. I mean, it's a completely different level of interfacing with these systems than ever existed before. And believe it or not, Versus and Planet, like, look at the marketplace. They're the leaders in the marketplace in all the tools that are not government. And so, you know, I mean,
well, we've already, Dan and I have already done a kind of brotherhood handshake for life, that we will show up. We're on this journey together. We will show up like fully. So just like Dan, I realize actually should have been, I was thinking of him coming next week for the community piece, but like I realize how relevant Dan is. Maybe we can see if Dan can come tomorrow to join us, and I'll ping Will and see if he can join us tomorrow for the conversation on this point. But this is a perfect example of like one of 8 fundable community solutions. Where
and Lucian, you know who else needs to play is Neil Sahota. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there.
Please, yeah.
But you know Neil, right?
I think I know Neil. He used to be IBM Watson, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Planet Home. I had a long conversation with Anthony last night, founder of Planet Home, who's watching all of this. He can't join this, but he was like, any technology we've created is all for the up game. Like you can use anything we've got, any models, any, you know, and so Neil's part of that. I had some great conversations with Neil about this. So let's like, right? Without, one of the rules of the game is leave your limiting beliefs behind. So it's like, what would fucking great look like? And then let's start, what is that project? Is it a combination, a partnership of like Unified Planet, Planet Home, Planet dot, like kind of crazy, right? When you hear all these names, Planet Lab and Versus.
And Geonauts.
And Geonauts, exactly. Like, let's describe that. And this is one thread, right? And then there's other threads around how do we imbue that with reverence and ritual. So that's like, you're getting exactly, this is what it is to play the game. And because of the hack, like the accelerated nature of the game, it's very easy for us to pull people in and be like, we're all talking about you. Come join this conversation and be part of what's emerging here.
Yeah, totally.
So
absolutely. Well,
Neil knows us. If you could reach out to Neil and invite him to join us tomorrow, I'll reach out to Will and Dan. Feel free to. I'll copy you on that and see if they can join that.
So Greg Wendt was already working with Neil and I on this when we went to Cape Canaveral about 6 months ago and met with Dr. Studi about the data streams from the space station. We already met with Space Florida. They're already into this. We've already got a number of big brands and projects, and he's the 3,000 data sources on the SDG accomplishment. Neil is. So, basically we can put these half a dozen people at the table on a project that's been moving for, I'd say realistically, a year to a year and a half now, after many, many years of talking about it. And Neil was also just on the phone with the team here that I'm working on the value chain transparency with. And the value chain transparency platform is the facilitation of finance, insurance, and philanthropy that supports, I believe, everything else we're talking about. And if you think about, investments and philanthropy in visible real-time feedback on the actual impacts of capital, not from ideas, but from satellite imagery, from humans on the ground doing quality control inspections and, working with raw materials providers and, transparent value chains to the point that, there's daily check-ins at nodes in the value chain, which are people, places, and things. Those are factories, those are warehouses, that's equipment houses, that's trading houses, checking in on camera and on sensors every day.
So this is kind of like just perfect example of where these technologies, we should have financial incentives for the companies creating these technologies to create them for the commons, not for the current market dynamics, which creates like the competitive tension, etc. So like, how do we align incentives? It's a bit like right now, I listened to the news this morning, and India and I believe China is currently in negotiations with Gilead around accessing the most promising cure for COVID, to be able to, like, AIDS and antiretrovirals. They did the negotiation where they started to be able to produce those like life-saving drugs at a fraction of the cost that Gilead was producing. Like in this case, Gilead is producing. So this is super interesting to think about how these technologies could be funded to be open source, but still reward the people, the companies that are creating that are raising investment in order to create them. It's like new business model development. And so this is part of like what we're thinking about is like, where are the pillars of civilization that absolutely should exist in the commons, because that's going to give our like new system design and cooperative advantage the momentum it needs to model like many other people creating value for the commons. Because bottom line, as our assessment is that, like, more often than not, entrepreneurs aren't creating companies and creating value to sell it. That's like the myth of Silicon Valley. More often than not, those entrepreneurs are doing it because they're like, it's their dharma, it's their life work. And if they had the alternative of like them raising money from venture capital and giving away their company and getting kicked out of their companies and all the rest of it, and only creating their companies to sell, for like to make a return for shareholders, if they had an alternative where they could get financially rewarded for creating value for the commons, most would. And so we want to prove that thesis.
Amen to that. And imagine proving it in real time. you know, Lucy, and everything that you're saying is absolutely right, but think about it from a risk mitigation perspective. If risk is the quantification of fears, right, and risk is what modern investing is based around, if risk is what drives tremendous amounts of venture philanthropy and, you know, the rest of versions of, you know, the deployment of capital for impact is entirely based on reporting, right, and risk mitigation instead of the impact. And that's the inverse relationship with money that's existed for a long time. But if you could literally show in real time, imagine rolling out a franchise, imagine doing employee training, you know, imagine trying to do management from a distance when you've literally got a body cam or, you know, a set of eyeglasses on an employee, you know, and you can walk people through spectrometer readouts on soil in the field from their smartphone. You know, it's just a completely different world of technology.
So happy you're here.
You know, geospatial is core to it.
So happy you're here, Mackenzie, and let's develop this into something that we can bring to others. And if there's any kind of synthesis that you want to share today, that we can reach out to Will and you know, Will Kahn, Dan Mapes, you know, Neil, etc., to bring them in to say that, hey, this conversation's going. And by the way, this isn't about like this being a project of Unified Planet. It's like, how can Unified Planet like give this an extra energy to make sure that the velocity with which this comes into the world is just, you know, like unforgettable. So you'd
have to, like, you know, put together a series of video conferences with all your friends and talk about it or something. You know, that that's how you do
let the games unfold. So one thing I'm hearing is that we didn't really incorporate in here is value chain transparency and value chains around this. It might be one of the categories we want to look at, but I just want to open this up. You know, Jeff, Sycamore, Adam, anything else you want to be sharing? We can somehow, the rabbit holes have rabbit holes, and so let's like make sure we today is about like as much diversity of these different pillars as possible.
The one person that I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that I'll send you his contact information is Dan Kittredge of the Bionutrient Association. If you're familiar with them, I'll send his contact, because he's creating a handheld mass spectrometer for the end consumer, so that they have prototype number 1 where you can hold eventually, hopefully, your phone up against a carrot and it can tell you which carrot is more nutrient dense than the other. So it puts the power and the information in the consumer's hand.
This is super cool as a project to profile.
Yeah, so they've been doing great nutrient density work for a long time. I would love to have him on this conversation.
Adam, you're 100% right. They're so cool. Bionutrient Food Association hangs out a lot with regen.network up there in the Northeast. And to your point earlier about permaculture and farmers using geospatial, regen.network is doing amazing stuff with that. There's another guy in New York City named Henry Gordon Smith that has a visual tool now for building indoor farms. And all of these are flowing through to financial models, environmental models, I mean, all kinds of carbon models, all the stuff that we didn't have steady data for before. Now we've got IoT sensors and satellite data and daily drone flyovers, and like, it's just a whole different world. So, you know, those people you mentioned, absolutely.
So
yeah, we know them well.
Feel free in the spirit of experimentation. Typically, we've had one before, but last time we kept the container 22. Now it feels like we could experiment with this energy of bringing people in, as the projects, at least inviting people in. So if there's people that you feel could contribute to the conversation for us tomorrow, we've only got 2 more days together before we come up with these 8 synthesis. And like, there is that, you know, sometimes you're like, what, those are just like arbitrary goals. But there is a power in like the forcing function of synthesis within a time frame. That we're finding that's what the game is bringing essentially. And so feel free to invite, and in particular, you know, there's a lot of like us white men here around this circle. And so that's one thing we're always super conscious of. So if there's more diversity that you can help us bring in, that would be extremely grateful. We'd be extremely grateful. But let's just go, Any other, like, we've got a lot of feedback here, but anyone else that wants to share? Sycamore or Jeff, anything that's coming up for you on the pieces we haven't, like, we often, so we saw this with sound. As soon as we go into the technology piece, we can discuss nothing else for so yeah.
I needed to say, I want to sit with it some more, and I like what
Jeff,
you're doing.
go ahead.
Oh, you know what? My connection, I think, got unstable. So you guys broke up, and I probably talked over somebody. Sorry about that. I actually was just saying that I want to sit with it all. I think I've said what I needed to say about my input, but I'm excited about what you're doing and what we're doing. And I think, yeah, I'm really excited about just what Steven was talking about, which is creating solutions. I mean, that's actually at the heart of local code. I mean, the whole idea is to help manifest solutions on the ground and then create a way to propagate them.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yep.
We are going to be moving into, funnily enough, from one. Sycamore, you go ahead, and we're going to be moving over at 12:30 to the Sound Technology Guild, where we'll keep this energy of future technologies up. But just remember, this is all about the infinite future, and so the technology at the dining room table is as important as like satellite imagery from space, if not more. So. Sycamore, do you want anything you want to add?
Yeah, I don't really know what to say. I'm super challenged by the facilitation or lack thereof. Like, to talk for 25 minutes about drones is the food technology group, and I totally support that. I'm in the same world, like I'm wanting to build that. I have glasses that show me nutrient deficiencies already. They're my own eyes. I have a finger that shows me water deficiencies. It's my own senses. I don't need a $500 million technology to do that. I have no interest in talking about this. And so it's just like, we just spiraled down that, and we had no process of like checking in on, and so it's just like, especially on day 2, where we're trying to create the larger list of it, I want food technology people to be able to dive into that. I want LiDAR maps, GIS maps, 6-inch topographical maps, all of these systems to be highly devoted to those who care about it. And at this point, I have no interest in that. And so it's like, we spent all of the time on that, food justice, reparations, all those things just dropped off. And it's just, I feel the excitement, and I'm so grateful we have all these connections, and I'm so grateful everyone wants to drop links and all the things they know. But it's just like, where are we here in our process? And just really wanting to like uplift people, like slowing down instead of like getting into one-on-one dialogues for 30 minutes of a 90-minute call, and just like trusting again that we're all building the same world. And I'm so devoted to working with you all for like years, decades, millennia, lifetimes to come. And like, I need to be in the field. And for the last half hour, I listened about some Google Glass, and I'm like, so bless, love you. It's 12:30. I want to end on a high note of all of the excitement that we're creating. And I'm peace.
I hear you, brother. And I completely hear you. I can get excited down the technology rabbit holes also. And we're definitely learning about the facilitation of like, how do we make sure we move through the 8 areas in a limited space of time. So if we may tomorrow, Sycamore, we start with food justice, food reverence, and we really go deep into that. Because there's a deep trust that there's all these different pieces, like this is this kind of Captain Planet moment that there is. We need to like value the earth and the air and the fire and the water. Like, we need to make sure there's space for each. So thank you, Sycamore, for just sharing where you're at on that. Appreciate you. Adam, thank you. Jeff, thank you. Mackenzie, we're gonna switch over. The others will be joining here now. So we'll see you. I'll follow up on an email of today this afternoon, and then we'll see you tomorrow.
Cheers.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Mackenzie.